It's a tumor she has. Poor thing. I looked at more carefully and I noticed that she had a bandage round her head, just below her eyes. It lay quite flat across the bridge of her nose, and one of saw hardly anything of her face except that strip of whiteness. As soon as she had gone, the keeper rose. Now I will leave to yourself. I don't know whether I made some gesture, but instead of going, he held it behind my chair. The sensation of someone posted at my back made me uncomfortable. The sun was getting low, and the whole room was flooded with a pleasant, mellow light. Two hornets were buzzing overhead against the skylight. I was so sleepy I could hardly keep my eyes open. Without looking round, I asked the keeper how long he had been at the home. 5 years. The answer came so pat that one could have thought he would been expecting my question. That started him off, and he became quite chatty. If anyone had told him 10 years ago that he would end his days as doorkeeper at a home at Marengo, he will never have believed it. He was 64, he said, and hailed from Paris. When he said that, I broke in. Ah, you don't come from here? I remembered then that, before taking me to the warden, he would tell me something about mother. He said she would have to be buried mighty quickly because of the heat in these parts, especially down in the plain. At Paris, they keep the body for 3 days, sometimes 4. After that, he had mentioned that he would spend the best part of his life in Paris, and could never manage to forget it. Here, he had said, things have to go with a rush, like you have hardly time to get used to the idea that someone's dead before you are hauled off to the funeral. That's enough, his wife had put in. You didn't ought to say such things to the poor young gentleman. The old fellow had blushed and begun to apologize. I told him it was quite all right. As a matter of fact, I found it rather interesting. What he had been telling me, I hadn't thought of that before. Now he went on say that he would enter home as an ordinary inmate, but he was still quite hale and hearty, and when the keeper's job fell vacant, he offered to take it on. I pointed out that, even so, he was really an inmate like the others, but he wouldn't hear of it. He was an official, like I've been struck before his habit of saying they, or less often, them old folks, when referring to inmates no older than himself. Still, I could see his point of view. As doorkeeper, he had certain standings, and some authority over the rest of them. Just then, the nurse returned. Night had fallen very quickly. All of a sudden, it seemed, the sky went black above the skylight. The keeper switched on the lamps, and I was almost blinded by the blaze of light. He suggested I should go to the refectory for dinner, but I wasn't hungry. Then he proposed bring me a mug of coffee au lait. As I'm very partial to coffee au lait, I said, thanks, and a few minutes later he came back with a tray. I drank the coffee, and then I wanted a cigarette, but I wasn't sure if I should smoke under the circumstances in mother's presence. I thought it over, really. I didn't seem to matter, so I offered to keep her a cigarette, and we both smoked. After a while, he started talking again. You know, your mother's friends will be coming soon to keep vigil with you beside the body. We always have a vigil here when anyone dies. I will better go and get some chairs and pot of black coffee. The glare of the white walls was making my eyes smart, and I asked him if he couldn't turn off one of the lamps. Nothing doing, he said. They will arrange the lights like that. Either one of them all on or not at all. After that, I didn't pay much more attention to him. He went out, brought some chairs, and set them out round the coffin. And one he placed a coffee pot and 10 or a dozen cups. He sat down facing me, on the far side of the mother. The nurse was at the other end of the room, with her back to me. I couldn't see what she was doing, but by the way her arms moved, I guessed that she was knitting. I was feeling very comfortable. The coffee had warmed me up, and through the open door came scents of flowers and breaths of cool night air. I think I dozed off for a while. I was wakened by an odd rustling in my cart. After having had my eyes closed, I had a feeling that the light had grown even stronger than before. There wasn't a trace of shadow anywhere, and every object, each curve or angle, seemed to scar its outline on one's eyes. The old people, mother's friends, were coming in. I counted 10 in all, gliding almost soundlessly through the bleak white glare. None of the chairs creaked when they sat down. Never in my life had I seen anyone so clearly as I saw these people. Not a detail of their clothes or features escaped me, and yet I couldn't hear them, and it was hard to believe they really existed. Nearly all the women were aprons, and the strings drawn tight round their waists made their big stomachs bulge still more. I never yet noticed what big punches old women usually have. Most of the men, however, were as thin as rakes, but they all carried sticks. What struck me most about their faces was one couldn't see their eyes, only a dull glow in a sort of nest of wrinkles. Once sitting down, they looked at me and wagged their heads awkwardly, their lips sucked in between their toothless gums. I couldn't decide if they were greeting me and trying to say something, or if it was due to some infirmity of age. I inclined to think that they were greeting me, after their fashion, but it had a queer effect, seeing all those old fellows grouped round the keeper, solemnly eyeing me and bending their heads from side to side. For a moment, I had an absurd impression that they had come to sit in judgment on me. A few minutes later, one of the women started weeping. She was in the second row, and I couldn't see her face because of another woman in front. At regular intervals, she emitted a little choking sob. One had a feeling she would never stop. The others didn't seem to notice. They sat in silence, slumped in their chairs, staring at the coffin or at their walking sticks or any object just in front of them, and never took their eyes off it. And still the woman sobbed. I was rather surprised, as I didn't know who she was. I wanted her to stop crying, but dared not speak to her. After a while, the keeper bent toward her and whispered in her ear, but she merely shook her head, mumbling something I couldn't catch, and went on sobbing as steadily as before. The keeper got up and moved his chair beside mine. At first he kept silent. Then, without looking at me, he explained. She was devoted to your mother. She says your mother was her only friend in the world, and now she is all alone. I had nothing to say, and the silence lasted quite a while. Presently, the woman's sighs and sobs became less frequent, and, after blowing her nose and snuffing for some minutes, she too fell silent. I was ceased feeling sleepy, but I was very tired and my legs were aching badly. And now I realized that the silence of these people was telling on my nerves. The only sound was a rather queer one. It came only now and then, and at first I was puzzled by it. However, after listening attentively, I guessed what it was. The old men were sucking at the insides of their cheeks, and it caused these odd, wheezing noises that had mystified me. They were so much absorbed in their thoughts that they didn't know what they were up to. I even had an impression that the dead body in their midst meant nothing at all to them. But now I suspect that I was mistaken about this.